All right, I'm starting the meeting, but bear with me. I got to call one of our council members. Where's Shay? Do I need to dial 1 before? Okay.
Hello?
Hey, can you hear us all right, Lydia?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, Shay or Drew, do we need to turn this up so people can hear Lydia? You know, because if she has a question or a comment, I want to make sure that that's captured. Is that going to feedback on mine?
No, it shouldn't. It won't feedback.
Okay. All right, thank you, Lydia, for calling in.
Yep, can you hear me?
Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
All right, this is the Cortez City Council work session. Today's Tuesday, March 28th, 2023, and the time is 6:34 p.m. I'm calling this meeting to order, and we'll start with A on our agenda. We're going to hear from Judge Beth Padilla addressing council on municipal court updates and operations.
Good evening. I wanted to update all of you on some of the things that have been happening in municipal court and answer any questions that you may have. First, an update that I am continuing to order alcohol evaluations. We are receiving those. So defendants that have a criminal offense in the city of Cortez where alcohol is alleged to have been involved are routinely being sentenced to obtain an alcohol evaluation, and they are complying with that a majority of the time. And we are seeing those evaluations being returned to us. We do have funding available to them in the event that they're unable to access that service through their health insurance or Medicaid, Medicare, Indian Health Services, whatever medical providers they have. We've also started using a program online called Alive at 25. This was suggested by one of our visiting judges, and that is for young people that have driving offenses. And so we have had a few defendants that have completed or been sentenced to do the Alive at 25 program. And again, we do have funding available to them if they're unable to pay for it. I know Ms. Odell, our court clerk, was able to assist one young man who was not able to financially pay the, I think it was like $90 in order to access the class. So those funds are being used very appropriately and positively, and I think that that is creating a positive change in the court. Ms. Odell has obtained a sign that is now outside of the court. It is digital. Our docket is digital. So that is another advancement as far as access to justice is concerned. Individuals can walk into the building and see when they're supposed to have court. They can access their case number. And so that is a major improvement in development within the municipal court, and I'm very grateful for Ms. Odell for that. We are continuing to use WebEx. So every Monday morning we have WebEx available. That is essentially like Zoom. And the IT department's been incredibly helpful getting that set up. We now have a recurring meeting ID on the website. So Ms. Odell and Ms. M are not required to call the defendants and give them a new code every Monday. Instead, they can just access the website. So again, it's an access to justice issue. Individuals that maybe don't live in our community or have returned to communities where they have family are able to participate in court by WebEx. So I think it's eliminated quite a few barriers. It's also allowed we have 2 defense attorneys representing indigent clients out of Durango, and they're able to appear by WebEx. So we have it set up that in the ante room, they're able to privately meet with the in-custody defendant by video. Then we can patch them into the courtroom. So again, huge advancements in the technology that's available and being utilized in the municipal court. And I will say in my communication with other municipal courts throughout the state, many are not doing this. And so this is a very positive thing that's happening. 2 other updates. Ms. Odell and I are planning a networking event this summer with other judges in our area, judges and court staff. So essentially, I'm a member of the Colorado Municipal Judges Association. Ms. Odell and I have attended a conference together, and I've attended one on my own, but there's not any networking occurring between municipal courts in our area. So Durango, Pagosa, Rico, Dolores, Mancos, maybe even Montrose Delta. So we plan to hold a lunch sometime this summer, probably on a Friday, invite those judges and court clerks to come, really as an opportunity to first see the beautiful facility we have in Cortez. We will likely invite alternate defense counsel's municipal court coordinator. This individual is actually out of Durango, so that he can speak to the other courts about alternate defense counsel. And really, it's just an opportunity for us to get to know one another, so that if something novel comes up in the courtroom, I'm able to call another judge in our community or nearby and ask how they're handling it. So we're really looking forward to that. The final update, and likely the biggest, is I have been working with the American Bar Association. They have a coalition on homelessness and poverty, and they, through the San Diego Municipal Court, established what they call a homelessness court. This was established in the 1980s. The model is used throughout the United States. And so Ms. Odell and I just did a conference call with a representative from the municipal court in San Diego, the defense counsel there, as well as 2 representatives from the American Bar Association in DC to implement an outreach court here in Cortez. Essentially, it's in its infancy, but the way that we envision it working is partnering with our local service providers that are already assisting at-risk individuals in our community. So that could be someone struggling with a housing situation, it could be a substance use issue, it could be a mental health issue. They will essentially be referred to, hopefully, the Pinion Project. I'm working on scheduling a meeting with them, but they have agreed to be essentially our local partner. And we would hold court for individuals in this specialty court, in the outreach court, at a different time. The idea is that the criminal offenses in municipal courts are very low level. We're not dealing with felonies. We're not dealing with violent crimes. And so the idea is that many times the individuals that are coming into municipal court, especially on a consistent basis, maybe someone that has 10 trespassing charges, maybe they have those cases because they're unhoused, and really the barrier is housing. And so through the outreach court, they would work with a local agency that's already addressing homelessness, so maybe the Pinion Project or some other organization, and they would essentially enter into an agreement saying, if we comply with the recommendations of this agency for a certain period of time, then the case would be removed from municipal court and essentially work as diversion. So really what we're trying to do is help people address the root cause of what is leading them into the courtroom, as opposed to just putting someone in jail for a day or two, or ordering them to do public service, or giving them a fine that they can't pay. So we're still working on developing how exactly it will work. I can tell you there's no funding request. The way that this is established through the American Bar Association is we are partnering with local agencies that are already doing this work. We're partnering with Access, who would be doing mental health services already, the Recovery Center, who's already providing substance use counseling and treatment, local agencies, the Veterans Affairs, the Salvation Army. So we're not asking any agencies to do additional work, and we're not asking for any funding from the city. So essentially, it's just wrapping around services for individuals that we are seeing in our courtroom over and over again in an effort to break that cycle. So I know that was a lot of information, and it's still very fluid, but I'm optimistic. The American Bar Association, through this specific subsection, will provide an immense amount of support. They will provide training to us in person in San Diego if we want, or by WebEx, or by Zoom. They will provide technical support. They will help us establish the steering committee. Essentially, this is something that's sort of a package that they can hand over to us and provide ongoing support. We would be the first outreach court in the state of Colorado if this is implemented in Cortez. And I think that it could really address a lot of the repeat offenders that we're seeing in the municipal court. So do any of you have any questions?
Sorry.
I had a really quick question. You talked about the Alive at 25 program, and it's fantastic. I know some kids from when I was principal at Southwest Open School that did that program somewhere. How many, it just kind of sparked a question, like what percent of people that you see in court would you say are kind of in that age range, like 16 to, 21 kind of a thing?
Not many. So we've started handling juvenile cases since I became the judge in 2021. I'm not sure if Judge Shaner did before. We probably have a juvenile case on the docket maybe once every 2 or 3 months. So not very frequently. The juveniles that we do have are driving offenses, typically speeding, texting and driving, some of those offenses that are typical for young people that just received their license. As far as like the 18 to 21 range, I would not say that we have very many. But I would say many of the defendants in our courtroom are either present because of traffic violations or trespassing, public intoxication, open container. So essentially alcohol-related offenses is what we see a lot in the courtroom.
I'd like to make kind of a comment more than a question on your, your court for the homeless. That was proposed for the same kind of thing for veterans 10, 11 years ago, and I was on that board as well. And there was a big talk about it, a whole lot of conversation about what we could do for the veterans and how it was going to help the veterans, and it was going to do this for the veterans, and it was absolutely wonderful. But they forgot about one of the key components. What about the victims? And I just want to place in your mind the victims of these crimes, as well as helping out the homeless. And I see where you're going, but I also don't want to forget about the victims.
Absolutely, and I think that's always something that I'm balancing from the bench, numerous considerations. I will say that many of the offenses that we see in municipal court are trespassing, possession of alcohol in public, people that are intoxicated in public. I don't want to say those are victimless crimes because they're not, but they're not the typical domestic violence, for example, where someone has maybe punched another person. We don't have those cases. We don't handle domestic violence cases, for example. So I think that is really important to consider. And one way that that is going to be addressed is if there's a request for restitution, then that person would not be appropriate for outreach court. So if an individual, I don't know, destroys your fence and you want them to repay that, then that individual would not be eligible for outreach court because there is someone that expects them to repay the damage, if that's helpful.
Well, that's fantastic. You answered my question because before they had forgot about that component, so
Right.
That's great.
And the Veterans Court, at one of the last conferences I went to, they have implemented that, I think, in the Aurora Municipal Court, and I think it's been pretty successful. So that is another specialty court that's available.
Judge, you mentioned that it sounds like San Diego and DC are pretty immersed in this outreach court kind of process. Are you aware of any municipality, any community that's much smaller that's implemented that type of program, and have you reached out to them to see how effective it's been in that community?
That's a very fair question, and I'm just in the beginning of this process. I'll be very upfront with you about that, and we certainly addressed that with the representative from the San Diego court, as he referenced having hundreds of defendants in a day, and I was like, well, hold on, things look a little different here. It's my understanding that this program is implemented in various size municipalities, but I am not personally aware of one similarly situated to us. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So the ABA is out of DC, and so that's why those representatives are from DC, and then the San Diego court was the first in the country that implemented. So that's how we ended up on the conference call with them. They did tell me that Colorado Springs wanted to start an outreach court years ago, and then it seems like there was some sort of change in leadership and that didn't happen. But as far as in Colorado, they said they're not familiar with any court that's implemented their program and sort of their framework.
Go ahead. I was just going to say Lydia has a question, and then Robert. Go ahead, Lydia.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I gotta watch the YouTube. I can't understand it on the phone. Hi, Judge Padilla. I thank you so much for explaining this, and I'm really excited. I just had a question. Do the community partners that the court would work with have funding to maintain the case management, and will it add more workload to them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I am just now starting to reach out to the community partners. Pinion Project has committed to work with us on this. I asked that question in the conference call with the ABA, and they essentially said there isn't additional case management. So the way that it's been explained to me is, let's say that I'm an individual that wants to access mental health services. So I go into Access and I schedule an appointment. When I do my intake, Access would add a question, one question, to their intake that says, do you have an open municipal court case? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then they would send information to, hopefully, the Pinion Project, who would then funnel it back to us and say, hey, this person is working with Access. They're already doing whatever they're going to do with Access. And then essentially there would be an agreement. So if I'm the defendant here, I would say, I agree that I will work with Access for the next 3 months. And then the judge will say, okay, if you work with Access for 3 months, then we'll just basically take your case off the docket. And if you do that successfully, we'll dismiss. So we're not looking for additional work for any of our agency partners. Because we know they're all really busy, and we certainly don't want to ask them to do anything that they don't have funding for. So I certainly am in the relationship building stage of this process. I don't know exactly who's going to be at the table at the end, but I'm hopeful that, I believe in the agencies in our community, and I think they will help me. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get them on board.
Can you give us an idea of how much of your docket, either percentage or number of cases, that this might qualify, that this program might affect?
So, if we look at individuals in the municipal court that are experiencing homelessness, a mental health issue, or a substance use issue, my gut would say 80%. That doesn't mean they would all want to participate in this program. That doesn't mean that they would be successful. And I'm making that number up, that's just my gut, as to who we're seeing in the courtroom, especially the repeat offenders, the people that are coming into court over and over again.
So it is the majority, as opposed to like traffic offenses or those kind of things. That's what I was sort of wondering, is what that split looked like. So that's helpful.
We're seeing traffic offenses and individuals that could potentially qualify for outreach court.
Okay,
That would be my perspective. And I'm looking at Miss Odell, she's shaking her head yes. So I just want to make sure that I'm not too off base with my perception. And it's not just, it would not only address homelessness. It could be mental health, substance use, or homelessness.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to ask is if you could send us over, like, maybe some reports or impact, something that shows impact of, like, those programs that are happening in other communities, if that's possible.
I think so. I'm always nervous to send you all information, so I think I'll send it to Mr. Sanders, and he will.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, pass it on. I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk to you directly, so I'll send it to the legal team or to the city manager. So essentially, you're just looking at data as to how this has been implemented in other communities.
Yeah, I'm curious to know.
I will reach out to the American Bar Association to see.
Mostly impact. I'd like to know, like, kind of what impact it's had in those communities. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just writing this down. Thank you. I will do that. Certainly the theory is that offenses in municipal court are low level. However, they can be barriers to individuals improving their lives. So if they have really high fines, or if they have to go to jail, that may impact their ability to do other things that they're trying to accomplish. So for example, if someone has to go to jail, but they are trying to engage in therapy, that may be a barrier to them continuing to engage in therapy. So that's sort of the very basic concept, but I will reach out to the ABA and see what kind of data they have as far as the impact that it's had on the communities. David?
I just want to add, to go on record for, I think I speak for the council when we say we appreciate the good job you're doing, and a lot of focus brought to important sections,
Thank you.
sectors, excuse me.
Yeah. Thank you, I appreciate that.
I have one last question. Do you,
Sure.
do you have like an anticipated timeline then with this?
I don't. And so a lot of that is based upon our community partners. I think the next steps are I will have a meeting, Ms. Odell and I will have a meeting with Pinion Project to see how they can help us and how much support that they're interested in providing. Then I think the next step is creating some sort of steering committee, outlining specifically what are the agreements, how will this work. It would obviously include the city attorney's office, who is the prosecutor in the courtroom. I have met with defense counsel and the city attorney and the prosecutor. They are all on board and supportive of this plan. We do have an identified alternate defense counsel attorney willing to take cases involved in this specialty court because they might be more involved. We don't know yet, but it's possible that they might take more time. And so one attorney has indicated she would be willing to take those cases. So I have buy-in on that side. I just need to now coordinate with really the service providers to make sure that, you know, I'm not missing anything, that people feel like this is a good plan and a good fit. I honestly think that there's already a lot of crossover between the defendants in the courtroom and agencies that they're already working with. I don't feel like this is going to be a brand new, I mean, many of the people in my courtroom are already working with the Pinion Project or Access or the Recovery Center or Social Services or, you know, Veterans Affairs.
Great. All right, any more questions from any council? All right, well, thank you so much, Beth. We really appreciate the work you're doing, you
Absolutely.
and Carla.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just, again, want to reiterate that without Ms. Odell and Ms. M, I would be completely lost. So the court works because they know how it is supposed to work. And it's definitely a well-oiled machine under Ms. Odell's supervision. So I'm very grateful for that, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thanks. All right, we're going to move on to B on our agenda, a presentation from Laura Lewis, the Executive Director for Region 9. Thanks for coming over here. No more snow, hopefully.
I really appreciate your time.
And make sure your mic is on green.
Okay. Thank you. And I will, let's see. We'll see if I am in. Does it take a little? And if not, I know you all have the handout, so I can just kind of go through those as well. I am so excited, though, to be able to give you an update on Region 9 and what we've been working on over the past year. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Magic touch. Let me just... And I will be going over a couple items in your packet. And one thing that you have is our corporate annual report that should be in your documents. And this, I just wanted to, I won't read it to you, but I just wanted to let you know it is an overview of kind of our year, highlight of our programs. You'll see who's on our board of directors. You'll see kind of how our finances are going, some of our key regional programs. And I will be highlighting some of those in my presentation, but hopefully this will be helpful for you. It also shows our microloan program volume, which is one of our largest programs. And then most specifically, I wanted to refer you to the 2022 performance report for Montezuma County. Region 9, since we work in the 5-county area, we do a more specific report for each county and the municipalities within them on what we specifically did for you and with you. And these, this should give you an idea on kind of what we've been doing in your communities. I just want to point out on the second page at the bottom is a list of our inquiries, and we have a chart. We had over 435 inquiries in 2022 in Montezuma County from Montezuma County residents. And these are phone or email, so we'll get an inquiry on Enterprise Zone or grants or our loan program, and we track all of those. And you can see that specifically in Cortez, we had 98 of those, and we track those year over year as well. And then the only other thing I'd like to point out, just as you're looking through that report, I know we tried to make it short, is on page 5. In terms of loans in Montezuma County, we do a microloan program, and that loan program is for startup businesses that are not yet bankable. So we don't compete with area banks. We will work with the bank, so all of you, I know, probably have funds at a bank, and if you wanted a loan, you would go to that bank, and they don't want to say no. And if they have to say no, they call us, and we participate with them so that they can do a loan with a client that maybe has a blip on their credit or lack of collateral or whatever reason. But we had 13 new loans that were based in Montezuma County. 2 were previous loan clients, so we always like repeat customers. And then we had 7 loans pay off. We saw a lot of loans pay off this year because of the increasing interest rates. Obviously, a lot of folks did other things so that they didn't have debt, and we have seen loan production slow because of the increasing interest rates. A new business, we do not want to give them a loan if they cannot make that work for them economically. I mean, that's not the point, so we look at that. And then as I go into this presentation, all the pictures that I have on this are Montezuma-based loan clients. So you can kind of see some of your community businesses in this. So for those of you who do not know much about Region 9, we are a nonprofit organization, and we are an economic development district. There are 14 regions in Colorado, and we just were not very unique in our name choice, being Region 9, and we covered the 5 counties, the 10 cities and towns, and the 2 tribes. To give you an update over the year, I'm going to highlight just a couple of our programs, and if you have any questions, please let me know. I mentioned that we had 435 inquiries in Montezuma, 98 in Cortez, that cover some of our different programs that we do. We do an enterprise zone tax credit program for businesses. We run that for our region, and that's basically a request of the state of Colorado. And then we also do a lot of data inquiries. We work with the state demographer, and we can get a deeper level of data. Many of you might be familiar with some of our data reports. We have grown a lot over the past year. I would say our biggest area of work was we integrated the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments. The Council of Governments covers our same region, and in 2010, it was formed to actually do a regional broadband project. It was formed through an intergovernmental IGA, so it was basically a governmental entity. And since that time, we've worked closely with them, but in 2022, we decided that having more than one regional organization was probably not in our best interest, and so we have combined their programs under the Region 9 umbrella. We have hired 3 new staff positions. One is Shaq Powers, and the county still talks to me. And then we are just thrilled to have him on board, and he is working on the expanded initiatives around broadband, transportation, and housing. We also, based on broadband, we are waiting to hear about a very large middle mile infrastructure grant to help connect kind of the missing pieces in our middle mile across the region. And we did complete a broadband plan update, and that's going to be available momentarily. We're doing kind of the final edits on that, and that's based on the priorities that each of our counties and communities have to connect kind of the highway so that then they can do last mile work. Some of you may have heard of the Southwest Opioid Response District, or SWORD. We had to come up with kind of a unique acronym. But SWORD is basically a regional council that we were asked to form by the state. You may be familiar with the pharmaceutical settlements around opioid substance use. And basically, our Attorney General was pretty instrumental in getting a lot of these pharmaceutical companies to settle. And that money gets brought into the state. It's an 18-year settlement, so the state will get money every year. And they have a formula which is basically 40% goes to each of the regions that are in Colorado in a regional pool, not like to us. And then 20% goes to the municipalities. Our region, in forming that regional council, it has to have government representation, and then it also has a lot of other members, as you could imagine, folks with lived experience, access, our hospital, folks in the judicial system, folks in law enforcement. Our chair this last year was actually Justin Goodall, who's the marshal in Mancos. So we do have a broad brush on this committee. The goal is they get to decide what we will use the opioid dollars for in our region. And I am so thrilled to work for a regional organization because right now everybody is really playing nice in the playground. So all of our municipalities have opted out and they're putting their municipal money into the regional pot so that we have enough money to make an impact. Not to pick on Silverton, but they said you can have our $200 a year. I'm kidding, but you know, some of these amounts are pretty small, but together we can make a big difference. And I will be talking more about what that council is doing. We also, thanks to SHAC, we worked on getting licensing for behavioral health transportation across county lines. That was a new legislative initiative that we had to meet, and we took that on and we're good. And that happened kind of behind the scenes. And so if someone has a mental health crisis that needs to go across a county line, we now have everything in place where we can do that with our transit providers. We updated our livable wage and our Region 9 snapshot reports. All of this is on our website. And those are just some of the highlights of what we did over the past year, plus everything that's kind of in your paperwork. So this year, these are some things we're really going to be focusing on. The SWORD feasibility study, I mentioned that we are working with the SWORD Council on what we're going to do with opioid dollars. As you know, the money has to be spent to help combat opioid misuse or substances in general. And so we're doing a feasibility study on the request of the council because the council says if we're putting all this money into a pot, we want it to impact everyone in the region and we want it to be big. And we need a lot of things in our region. We have no inpatient treatment, we have no residential treatment, we have no sober living in homes. We also have no medically assisted treatment, such as a methadone clinic if somebody is trying to withdraw and needs medical supervision. There's a lot that we don't have, so we want to figure out what can we do with this money, what is feasible that can make an impact in our region. And so once we have the results, which should be in June, we will then try to put that money towards that over the next 18 years. Transit connectivity is something we're working on. As you know, there are transit providers, whether it's senior transit, whether it's the City of Durango transit within city limits. We want to connect you between communities. And so we're looking at how we can do that by, one, we have a landing page that we're putting together with all of the providers. So technically you could go figure out how to get from Pagosa Springs to Cortez. And we're looking at in the future that you can map that out and we can have a single ticketing system. So that's on the plate. We also on our website have a data dashboard and data reports. That data dashboard has Cortez specific data that you can utilize, and it includes industry sectors, a lot of demographic and psychographic data, and I really recommend that you look at that. We also added this year a commercial real estate search tool. When you're looking regionally for businesses, you probably know that La Plata County, for example, is very expensive. And they do not have a lot of commercial properties that are available for businesses as they grow. There's a lot of office space, but there's not a lot of light industrial or commercial space. Our goal is that if a company cannot grow in our region, what happens? They leave. We do not want them to leave. I'd rather they leave La Plata County and come to Montezuma County or go to Archuleta County than lose them in our region. And so this is just a listing for commercial real estate for businesses so that we can help them stay in our area. I have two examples for you. One is Tailwind Nutrition. You may be familiar with them. They do sports products, it's not drinks, but powders. Yeah, like I don't know how to explain it. But they actually were in Bayfield and they outgrew their facility. They've been looking for 2 years to try to find a facility that met their needs. And they finally found one, but we could have lost that company because they could not afford to grow in our region. And a lot of those really cool companies really contribute to our branding of us as a region. You know, the Ospreys, the Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factories, things like that. And my second example is Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory. As you know, they're international and they're based out of Durango. All their chocolate that is made and shipped comes out of Durango. You've probably seen their trucks. They were getting very limited, and they actually are in 3 buildings now in the Durango area. But they actually started their own trucking company so that they could control their refrigerated trucks to send their product, because when they were relying on other freight and transportation, the costs were cost prohibitive. And as you know from our weather, they're very cost prohibitive in bad weather. The Grant Digest, we a year ago hired a community grant writer, and the goal is that we know that there's supposed to be a lot of money coming down and coming available through the federal government and the state. And we wanted to set our region up that if there's going to be money there, whatever you think of why or how much or whether we should be doing that, we want that money to come here. We don't want the money to go up to Denver. We don't want the money to go to another state. And so we are working with our governments to help with the capacity of grant writing for infrastructure projects. And we have a Grant Digest, which is a monthly grant newsletter that's open to anybody. I can add you to the list. And we've been working with the community grant writers that are now Cortez has, as well as Montezuma County. And so we're trying to make sure we collaborate and that we can bring as much money to do the projects that we need to do in our region. And obviously, because we have some grant writers in Montezuma County, we are doing a lot of work, let's say in Dove Creek and Rico, because Rico still doesn't have a sewer system. So things like that, and that's been something that we can really help for as a region. And the Grant Navigator is a new title. We got kind of a voluntold unfunded mandate, you know, from the state, where we now are getting research and information from the state to distribute on grant availability, and they're trying to track what is happening in terms of applications and money that we're bringing into the area. I mentioned middle mile broadband, regional housing efforts. We're trying to stay connected and work on how we can start filling those needs. Obviously, economic development support. We work with all of the economic developers that are on community and county levels to try to help make sure that we're helping where needed, but we're going with the priorities of each community. And then finally, updating the Community Development Action Plan. If all of you know Heather Otter, then you know what the CDAP is. That is something she works strongly on. And basically, the CDAP is a list of projects, and we will be updating Cortez's list of projects this year, which is very timely for all of this funding that's coming down. And it's your priority projects, whatever that may be. New police station, you know, whatever road projects. All of those things get put in this community plan. And Region 9 is the keeper of the plan. And really what that means is that hopefully you guys don't have to do as much work, and that we get delegated that work. But a community plan, for example, HUD and a lot of state and federal agencies require that a project be on a community plan to be funded, so this is that community plan. And we do that for each of the communities, and we roll them up into the county plans that are approved by each Board of Commissioners, which is also a requirement of these community plans. And we hold those every 2 years. These are our representatives from your county that serve on our different boards. We now have one board, so we just have a Region 9 board that includes the COG, and we aren't using the name the COG, it's basically all under Region 9. And we do have a loan committee that includes 2 members from each county that serve and help make those loan decisions. And so these were your representatives in 2022. And our governments are also allowed an alternate, so they can make sure they are able to attend. So these are ways that we continue to help you, and we hope that you call us if you need anything. I mentioned all of these programs, and we're happy to help. And then we do work with the state to help businesses make use of all of the incentive programs that the Office of Economic Development has as well. And then this is our ever-growing staff. I'm so excited. And I really thank you for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you, Laura. Does anyone have?
All right.
You
guys were easy.
Lydia, do you have any questions?
Inundate them with paperwork, that's right. Great, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to C on our agenda, a presentation from our city manager.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this agenda item is to invite some council dialogue on the topic of some legislation that is being proposed. This was brought to our attention by the Colorado Municipal League. According to them, the Colorado governors and others have proposed legislation that involves mandates to local land use codes that affect municipalities differently based upon classification. And by the way, where we are, we're about the lowest classification on there. CML, which our city is a member, opposes this legislation not so much for the overall intent, which is to create affordable housing. You know, there's a lot of different portions of that depending on the tier of community that they've classified you as. But rather, this is being opposed as a preemption of local authority on these matters. As we look at this and we analyzed it based upon what's being proposed, Cortez actually exceeds what's being proposed for a community our size. So the issue really comes down to they're trying to preempt local authority. This seems to be a theme this entire legislative session. I've heard it termed by CML and others as an all-out assault on home rule. And as CML points out, this isn't really how Colorado was set up. We have a really excellent system of home rule municipalities and so on in this state. And so I'm just posing this to council and asking essentially how involved do you want city staff to get involved in opposing this, if at all? And I pose that to council. And one other point before you start discussing, with the passage of Proposition 123, actually our state is really well positioned to be able to start helping to finance people like us or municipalities like us to reach some of our housing goals. And that seems to be maybe a better place for the state to be involved versus trying to preempt local authority. But I will pose that question to the council and invite your discussion.
City Manager, can you describe in what ways we outdo this proposed legislation?
Sorry, Council, I was having a hard time hearing you.
Can you expand on in what ways we outdo this legislation?
Yeah, so like a housing needs assessment, that's encouraged for a municipality our size. We're already doing that for allowing ADUs. We already do that to increase footprint on, or density essentially, which we just barely passed. That's already a requirement, so we meet and exceed what's already being required. And as part of our land use code update, we're hoping to also meet it in the realm of essentially increasing the footprint that we can put on a lot, which will help in several ways, including water usage.
So Drew, is this in the works? Nothing's been passed at this point, is that correct?
Nothing has been passed, and as of the writing of this, it was proposed and had not yet been filed, although CML assures us that that's occurring, and it may have by now.
Okay, so your question is, do we want to be proactively involved in perhaps in opposition to this, or how do we deal with it kind of on the other end?
Well, what we're trying to do is we're an interest group democracy, and the best and most effective way we can do this is to join with CML, which we would be joining 1,799 other municipalities that would be perhaps opposing this, but CML opposes it. Essentially what we would be doing is joining with CML in our opposition.
Yeah, I think I was really surprised when I saw this, and I saw this before CML came out with the press release, and was actually really surprised by the whole thing. And my first thought really did have to, really went to kind of that home rule status. And, you know, it just seems like a kind of an overreach, in my opinion, but I don't know how other people feel.
Yeah, I would support that also. I think home rule and local control are extremely important. We are 8 hours away from Denver, and we are here every day. We see the issues around housing, and we're working to address them. I don't know the last time the governor was here, but it hasn't been recently, and he has no idea what's going on in Cortez. So I think that it's very important for that power to remain with local communities who see the issues and work to solve the problems in the communities. And I would support us working with CML to make that very clear to Denver.
Madam Mayor, if I could interject, and Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe CML has asked for action by any of the municipalities as of yet. And in fact, we're sitting in on a webinar tomorrow, and it conflicts with another meeting some of us are participating in on the second half of the webinar, and I asked them if they were going to record it so we could watch it later, and they said, well, they weren't going to record or allow it to be recorded through the Zoom function or WebEx. I'm not sure which one they're using, but they did say that they anticipate the legislation being modified numerous times before it gets to the point where they would be requesting formal support for CML's position. And so I don't think you need to make any decision tonight. Obviously, it wasn't put on as an agenda item, but I think Drew's certainly correct in informing you of what's going on behind the scenes. I would also mention that, in terms of overreach, the state has interjected itself from time to time in local land use. Back in 1972, they passed Senate Bill 35, which requires local governments to enact subdivision regulations to regulate the division of land into parcels smaller than 35 acres. And of course, we have subdivision regulations. They also require municipalities and counties to adopt or create a planning commission. And if they create a planning commission, they require the planning commission to adopt a comprehensive master plan. But they don't really provide a lot of rules as to what goes into the master plan, certainly, and they indicate that it's an advisory document, not a regulatory document. The subdivision regulations do have some
specific requirements that you have to address. But beyond that, they haven't gotten into the weeds on policy issues, which is what I see this legislation is perhaps going that next step and giving direction to the local governments as far as the policies in their zoning codes. But that's, I guess, all I have to add on that issue.
All right, I'd say it sounds like at least the majority of us, feel concerned about this, so I would keep us up to date as the language gets more clear on this and what the state plans.
Okay, thank you, council.
I saw all the council's heads shaking affirmative, so I think we really need to take a proactive rather than a reactive. So we need to stay on top of it and be Johnny on the spot when it comes to stopping the land grab.
I think it'll be probably a pretty hot topic at CML this summer. I doubt if it'll be resolved by then.
Well, certainly the legislative session, we hope, will be done by then. But, and I think all that's asked tonight is, number one, we want to inform you and through you to the community what we're doing, but also, we feel like it's, up to you to make sure that we're on track and use our time effectively and as the council would wish. So it sounds like we've got at least the tentative direction we're looking for, and we will proceed accordingly. Thank you very much, council.
All right, we're going to move on then to general discussion. Does anyone have anything that they'd want to bring up?
I just want to say that my wife was hit on North Broadway from rear last week, so she's fine, everything's fine, but she was going 30 miles an hour, and evidently that wasn't fast enough.
Jeez. I'm sorry to hear that, Dennis, and, that intersection has been brought up before, that it's unsafe in our community, so hopefully CDOT will hear us. Okay, with that then, we'll adjourn this meeting and we'll start the regular one at 7:30.